Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a fireside chat with Kim Thomas from Fiserv. I'm Lori Cohen, and I head marketing at Percona. Today, our guest is Kim Thomas from Fiserv, and Fiserv is a multinational Fortune 500 company that focuses on financial technology and financial services. The company's clients include banks, and credit unions, as well as retailers and a myriad of companies. In fact, you probably don't know that every day you are interacting with Fiserv. And their mission is really to move information and money around the world as the world moves. So thank you so much for joining, Kim Thomas from Fiserv. And why don't you just give us a kind of brief introduction?
Hi. My name is Kim Thomas. My primary role is I'm a database architect with Fiserv. I've been with the company for the past 5 years. And my primary responsibility at Fiserv is to deliver open source database solutions across the enterprise, both on public cloud providers and on-prem on our database platforms. So primarily, we use a lot of open source databases, MySQL, MongoDB, MariaDB, and Postgres across the enterprise. So thank you for having me, Laurie.
Oh, no, it's awesome to have you. And we know that you and Fiserv are huge proponents of open source, right? So kind of why? What's that journey been like? Because my sense is throughout your career, you probably have worked with both proprietary and open source databases.
That is correct. Yes. Over my career, I've worked with both proprietary as well as open source databases. Primarily at Fiserv here, we have a large footprint of open source databases, and we use them, across the board for our OLTP, analytical, NoSQL, and key value pair data stores that we have, both for internal and external applications. As a result of this, we have used both the enterprise database software and support from Percona for the last 6 years. And we are glad to have them as a partner that offers enterprise support.
So tell me about that. So because, clearly Fiserv, what you do is so critical, right? You can't have downtime, right? You can't hit a website and not be responsive. So how has that relationship sort of grown and the responsibility of that partnership over time?
Sure. Over the last 6 years, we've sort of quadrupled our open source database footprint, either through merger and acquisitions or, developing new financial solutions. So as a result of this, it's very critical for us to have open source support around our open source database platforms. So I think about 6 years ago, our database center of excellence team, had conversations with Percona, and they decided that, we partner with you for enterprise support on our open source platforms. So that's sort of how we started our relationship with Percona.
And has that grown over the years? I mean, do you feel, is Percona a vendor or a partner when you think of the relationship?
It's basically a partnership that we have with Percona at this point, because we've partnered with them on a lot of projects, and they've been a great support partner for us in the open source database space.
So when you think about the importance of meeting SLAs, when you think of the importance of security, the model of Percona, right? So we take community versions of software, right, that are open source, right, or source available, and we build on top of them enterprise features. Correct. And we actually give that technology away, right? It is what I like to say is freely available, right? Sure. So that might surprise some people, but on top of that, you use our software, but to run it, you rely on our expertise, both of mostly of our people, I would say, right? And Correct. Our technology. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So yes. So obviously, we have a lot of open source systems that we've either developed internally or we've acquired over time. And a lot of those systems are, have SLAs, whether it's internal SLAs or client-facing SLAs. And in order to achieve those SLAs, we have to make sure that the software that we have running underneath is supported and patched and, it's compliant, right? Partnering with Percona, Percona takes open source software and, wraps it around with all those security features. And this helps us, to address any security vulnerabilities or any, bugs that we encounter in the database software. And that's the great thing that we can have around open source software, to have one central place where we can get support for, whether it's MariaDB, MySQL, MongoDB, or Postgres. We have one support partner that we rely on to, get support and, solutions from.
That's great. So do you think of it as one throat to choke or one hand to shake when you think about the relationship?
It's actually one hand to shake, I think, because, it's a partnership, right?
Yeah.
We expect, to run these softwares across our enterprise, and we are held to high SLAs for these. And if there is even some of these systems have zero downtime, and having products like MongoDB and extra DB clustering, all these products that Percona has, helps us to achieve some of those SLAs, right? Whether it's from an availability perspective or whether it's from a disaster recovery perspective, you guys, there are solutions that you guys provide that we implement and use across the board.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about the partnership and when you think of open source, I know you have a great story of actually developing something together. It has to do with Mongo, right? Developing a solution together. Can you talk about what you did and why that was so important, not just for Fiserv, but also within the open source community?
Sure. Recently, we had a need to, deploy and scale, an application on demand for multiple tenants. And as part of that, we had to sort of build the infrastructure and deploy the application and the databases, right? So we partnered with Percona to sort of build a database pipeline, deployment pipeline. Since this was a pretty big Mongo cluster, there was lots of, things like sharding and things like that that had to be applied on these because, they had lots of data underneath them. So, we partnered with Percona and they helped us develop, some Ansible playbooks and that we could integrate with our infrastructure, Terraform and, VMware infrastructure that we could then, use as a pipeline to deploy these, massive clusters, both on-prem and even in public cloud. So that was a great effort that, that I had with Ivan, that we had done with Ivan and the Percona team. So, and then, we have as you mentioned, Laurie, we did that as a presentation for your open, database open source conference.
Yeah, so it is a session for Percona Live, and we're going to drop that in the chat. So if anybody actually wants to see what you did and how you did it, we'll add that link. So how successful was that endeavor?
It was a very successful endeavor. We usually, some of our, as part of automating some of our build pipelines, we've looked at automating, database deployments as well as part of that, right? So along with that, this was a great effort. So that way we could have a deployment, a pipeline deployment of a key value store like MongoDB, ready to go on demand, right? Anybody could, deploy infrastructure and then use these Ansible playbooks to deploy a full-fledged, sharded Mongo cluster. So it was a great effort, and it was definitely worth our effort and time.
Mm-hmm. So I imagine it actually makes you more productive and saves money in the long run too within Fiserv.
Correct. That is correct. It helps us to deploy code faster and in a more agile fashion, and also it helps us to scale these things.
Yeah.
When we want to build this for multiple clients, we can take these deployments and scale it and, build it out faster. So it's been a very great packaging of, having database, deployed as code.
And so once you come up with that and it's market tested, right, and QA'd, you give it back to the community?
I believe so. I mean, some of this work is out in the community. I mean, open source software and, solutions have always been out in the community, right? There's lots of great examples where, companies have built entire infrastructure on open source software. So I believe, it's available to the community as well, all these Ansible playbooks.
Yep, that's great. Now, I also know because you run multiple databases, you also use Percona, what we call PMM, Percona Monitoring and Management. And I realize right now, we could focus on the monitoring part. We have a lot of management features that are coming, but let's talk about monitoring.
Yeah, so we obviously use PMM because it helps us give better understanding of our, various open source database infrastructure and, platforms, right? Whether it's from a performance perspective or whether the health of our clusters, or whether it's any other SQL tuning, things like that. We rely on PMM quite a bit. Obviously, it has, you can use it to alert to various alerting channels like Slack and Microsoft Teams and, a lot of VROps, things like that, right? So it has a lot of, built-in capability out of the box. And also it's a pretty lightweight application built on Grafana and Prometheus and, packaged all together, mostly we run them here as Docker containers. So they're pretty self-sustaining as far as from deploying them. So it's been a great product for us. We use it across the board to detect a lot of things. We use a lot of the metrics that, it has on its dashboards, and we build dashboards around that, to monitor, whether it's our Postgres instances or Postgres clusters or MySQL clusters or Mongo clusters, right? So we have a lot of tooling around PMM that we use today.
That's awesome. And again, you can see your databases regardless of where they are, right? So that must be an advantage as well, whether they're private cloud, public cloud.
Correct. Yeah. PMM, we use it even in the public cloud platforms. And also we use it to monitor internal databases as well.
Okay, that's awesome. Now we do have a question that it says, how can you take backups for big Mongo clusters using Ops Manager or other tools? Now, clearly in a community version of Mongo, there is no Ops Manager. So, but you also do it. So how are you doing it?
Correct. So we use some of the tooling that comes from Percona for that, right? Percona has Percona Backup for Mongo. It's an enterprise backup tool that Percona provides for Mongo, and we use that to back up our big clusters today. And they have point-in-time recoverability and all those features as part of that software package. So it's something if you that can be used. We use it on big clusters today.
Awesome. And just talking about Mongo for a second, have you ever run into a problem that the Mongo experts or consultants that you worked with couldn't help you solve?
No, not really. I mean, obviously we've had lots of challenges in the past where, we've collaborated and, found solutions. But, there's never been a situation where, we were left out in the open or, anything of that nature. So yeah, we've had, obviously lots of, over the years, there've been lots of incidents. There's been lots of things that we've reached out to you guys for support, and we've had obviously great feedback from our side, as far as maintaining SLA levels and things like that.
Okay, that's awesome. So one of the things I know we've talked about in the past is, and again, mentioning that our technology is freely available, right? So that is somewhat of a competitive advantage, right, for Fiserv, right? Because just the cost of the infrastructure is less. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, some of our software products, obviously, that we provide to our customers are, have, multi-tiers of software, underneath them, whether it comes to a database or application software. So, having, an open source software underneath that, helps us reduce the total cost of ownership of that particular product, right? So that definitely helps us in competing in the marketplace, for similar products, it places us at a much better position, when we sort of cost these things, right? So it's a great advantage, and we can confidently use open source software and support from Percona to help us with all these deployments.
Yeah. So the way we talk about it is we say we cost down, performance up. Do you agree that you're getting both of those things when you work with Percona?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of cost savings, when we use your software. And then, and there's no compromise as far as when it comes to support, right? Because we use it, on a lot of our tier 1 systems today. So, we've always been happy with what the support model that Percona has offered us.
Okay, that's awesome. So we have a second question, which says, does Mongo support help if there are any issues or bug fixes needed?
So I would think that's probably more of a question for your product management team, but yes, I mean, we've had, bug fixes delivered to us from Percona for various issues on the Mongo platform. But, again, I think, they follow pretty much a similar cycle from a release perspective, I think, on the Mongo platform.
And here's another question. You mentioned that for open source databases, Percona wraps security features in them. What are these features, and are they standard or customized for Fiserv? So I can say that they're standard, but you can talk about what those features are.
Yeah, I mean, most of it is standard, TDE, data encryption, data SSL features, backup software. A lot of this is everything that I believe Percona offers is available to everybody. I mean, there's nothing that's specially packaged for Fiserv, I believe.
No, that's totally true. I mean, that's where when you think about Percona, we just believe in open source, right?
Correct.
We believe that the innovations that you derive should be given back to the community. Correct. And so yeah, so I think, and Ansible I think is a perfect example, right?
Correct.
I believe it was freely given back to the community, so other people can benefit from that as well.
Correct. And then we use similar things back as well, right? Like those things that we share across the open source community, and not obviously you have to take into consideration security and a lot of other aspects when you start using these things, but everybody has to do their own research before they decide to use this, right? Make sure it works in the environment and it's secure enough for their purpose. There's lots of obviously customization that needs to be done to these open source Ansible tutorials or products or examples we put out there. Right.
So at the end of the day, also, the other thing I would say is people come into play, right? So whether it's your people, right, that you're managing, or whether it's Percona people, right? I mean, the software takes you to a certain point, but then really to derive all the value to solve the problems, like you said, coming up with a solution for Ansible or other partnerships, it's got to be driven by the people too, right?
Definitely. Like I think from the support team and the build teams that we have here today, we partnership with Percona quite a bit, whether it's on new technologies or how we can basically set up some infrastructure, database infrastructure as a code, or running database clusters. So we use a lot of the expertise that Percona has to offer, right, for this, whether it's even just through basic support tickets or consulting engagements.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And I know since you've been with Percona for a long time, and we are partners, you also get to see where Percona is going, right? And partly it's this pivot to a platform, right? Using more technology to really allow companies to be way more agile in terms of how they spin up databases, how they monitor databases, and how they manage them. What's your sense of that, kind of pivot, and where Percona is heading, and how that intersects with what Fiserv needs?
Yeah. So in the new world, most of the compute is sort of a DBaaS model, right? You look at providers, they all have either their DBaaS services, and so that's the general model that database computing is going towards, right? And as a financial fintech company, we try to sometimes co-locate a lot of this data in our own data centers for security and compliance reasons, and we obviously are looking and exploring to build our own database platform, right? And we've obviously we saw your presentation of your platform, and we are obviously definitely interested to do POC with it and understand it and use it across our enterprise, because that makes us more agile. If we have, say, for example, a DBaaS platform that runs on Kubernetes or any of the other Kubernetes platforms that are available, it makes things a lot easier for us, right? Like we can spin up database environments at a much faster rate, and also it gives us a more sense of security to co-locate the data in some of our data centers, right? So that's a new direction that we are looking at today.
So when you think about it, is it this notion that it's like a single pane of glass? Is that how you're thinking about it, where you can both deploy and then with PMM monitor and manage all of your infrastructure?
Yes. So as part of some of this, tooling and automation and platform building, obviously there will be, monitoring around that. So, yes, PMM is probably going to be used extensively to monitor these, Kubernetes clusters or, the databases that run on that as services, I guess.
But in general, you like this idea that you can very quickly spin up whatever database your developer wants, basically.
Correct. Yes. Provided, the platform is stood up first, right? The Kubernetes has to be there. And then, you take your operators and you basically run them on those platforms. So yes, it gives us, a much better and faster way to deploy databases. Very, very agile, right? It reduces our, delivery times for, products for our development teams and for for our sales teams, because a lot of these products also, are customized for selling to, to our customers, right? So they can showcase these products quickly. We can build, small environments very fast, with scripts and, stand them up. So yes, I think that's the general idea.
Yeah, it sounds like you might be customer number one. No, I'm just teasing, but you see the value in it, right? Because you already.
We definitely, our database center of excellence is definitely, exploring platform options to run databases on the platform, right? So, or having database operators and platform, and a platform is, I think, a great thing.
Yeah. So do you ever think back on your career? Because it's been like 20, 25 years, like how different is the world? Like, do you see the world differently, like from when you started your career to now?
Yeah, I think databases have evolved over time. I started with mainframe computing, and today I'm computing in the cloud. So I think over time, obviously things have changed, and it's a lot easier to today deploy databases, whether you're a small company or a big company. You don't have to go buy infrastructure. You probably could deploy it on the cloud, with an account, and so I think a lot of that has changed over time. The wait time for databases obviously are just a few clicks away now, versus you wait for the infrastructure to show up at the data center, right? So I think things have changed a lot, but I think the primary idea of databases have stayed the same. Always need them, to store data. There's no other way we can, organize and look at data without databases, right?
Yeah.
All these various databases provide us the capability to do that.
No, it's true, and do you think they're more important than ever, right? So, kind of COVID is one thing, right? Everything moving to the cloud, but just, like I have my Fitbit, like there's health tech, there's fintech, right? Is it more important than ever because of so much data?
Correct. So, everything, we wear wearable tech, all these are IoTs that are sending data back to HQ all the time, right?
Yeah.
Over time, we've only have more data now. Like 20 years ago, we probably had 1/4 of the data we have today, or maybe even less, right? So, we have a lot of data, and the data needs to be organized. At the end of the day, it needs to live somewhere, and people need to access it somehow, right? So these database tools, whether it's key value stores or, regular RDBMS databases, they help us access that data, right? Whether it's to aggregate the data or look at it and, all that, right? So I think, databases, I think are not going away. They're always going to be there. It's just that how you're going to manage to look at it, right? Database software is basically let you, manage that data and look at it. Data, right? So I think, it's only going to go, data is only going to grow over time. We have, every device we own is an IoT today. So
yeah. So I think we have one more question, and I'm going to read it and see if it's applicable. So MongoDB Community Edition has some licensing terms, which is not good to be used at enterprise level. Since Percona's server from Mongo is built on Community Edition, does all Mongo licensing terms apply there? And do you have different licensing terms?
That I'm not 100%
Yeah.
sure about that. That's probably a question for Lori, for you.
Yeah. Well, the truth is we use the community version, which is source available. It's not, quote, open source, but we live by all the licensing requirements of Mongo. And then, as you said before, we take the basic community version and we augment it with tools and features that really kind of harden it and make it an enterprise class solution. And not just for Mongo, right? You use our MySQL solution. Postgres is our newest flavor, but we're doing that with Postgres as well, right? And you use Postgres.
Yes. Yeah, we do have Postgres clusters as well.
Yeah. So I hope that answered your question. I mean, Mongo is the stickiest, right, in terms of licensing, but it is still, that answers my question. Thanks. Okay. So, it's funny. You've heard people talk about the end of the DBA, right? People are going to become reliability. Is that right, engineers? You don't think that's true, do you? I mean, are you going to wear your title proudly? Because as we talked about, data is everywhere.
Yeah, I think, obviously the job has evolved over time, right? People are more architects now versus, actual engineers, because a lot of these platforms have pre-built, database solutions on them. So I think, at some point, somebody will have to still, manage the data. So I think, some data management is always going to be there.
Yeah.
At scale, it might not be to the scale we do it today, but I think it still exists.
Yeah.
A lot of these platforms, you need, people who can actually operate them, right? Whether it's these cloud platforms or, Kubernetes platforms, they all need operators at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But, people will be still around doing this.
Yeah. So you're not putting that genie back in the bottle anytime soon?
I hope not.
Yeah, exactly. So with this explosion, what do you see, ultimately the basic value of a company like Percona, both what we're offering you today, and as you can see, the innovation and this sort of type of solutions that we're going to roll out in the future?
I think, these solutions like platform, for example, I'm going to use that as an example, is a great value add, right? Like for companies like Fiserv, who are primarily in the financial technology space, we process a lot of data, and, we'd like to, know where our data resides. And, so building our own database platform and things like that are quite critical to us. So I think, a partnership with Percona is definitely the right direction for us, at least as far as, taking this to the next era.
That's awesome. So is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to share with the audience?
No, thank you for having me. It was a great conversation. I appreciate your time. And,
no, we appreciate yours. It's kind of awesome, and it's awesome, to have real champions, right? Like we can say what we do all day long, right? But when you have other people really champion what you do, and because you have a lot of choices in the market. Let's face it, right? Like when you fly, it says you have a lot of choices, but thank you for picking JetBlue, right? You have a lot of choices out there. And so it's kind of awesome that what I would say is, I mean, you have a significant relationship with Percona, which
That's
over a
correct.
long period of time, right?
Yes. Yeah, we have a long history as far as, you know, the open source database platform goes. That's correct.
Yeah. So it's awesome, you know, to sort of, you know, for you to, you know, kind of help us champion the brand and, you know, have trust in us and our people and our solutions. So it's really thank you.
It's
Because
my
we really
pleasure. Thank you
appreciate
for having me
this.
again.
Okay. All right. Thank you
All
so
right.
much. And that's a wrap of our
Yeah.
fireside chat with Kim Thomas of Fiserv. Thanks everybody for joining, and thanks again. Bye-bye.